The champagne flute hit the marble floor before anyone had a chance to react. It didn't shatter dramatically. It simply cracked in two, the stem rolling one way, the bowl another, and the pale gold liquid spreading slowly across the tile like something spilled in a dream. The server who dropped it flinched. Two guests stepped back, and in the half-second of silence that followed, Theodora Vance, Dr. Theodora Vance, chief medical researcher, and the woman whose name appeared on 11 active patents, stood in the doorway of the Alderton Grand Hotel ballroom and did not move. She had not expected warmth. She had not expected the kind of welcome people gave each other in this room. The double kiss and the hand on the arm, and the manufactured laugh. She had not expected any of that. But she had expected, at minimum, to be treated as though she were standing on the same floor as everyone else. The man at the door, not a security guard, just a man in a tuxedo who had appointed himself to this role, looked at her the way people look at things that do not belong. "Can I help you?" he said. The question was not a question. Theodora held up her invitation. Ivory cardstock, embossed lettering, her name printed cleanly in the center. He took it from her hand without asking, turned it over, looked at it the way people look at things they've already decided are wrong. "There must be some mistake," he said. "There isn't," she said. He handed it back, said nothing, stepped aside with the particular body language of someone who has decided to let someone else deal with this later. Theodora walked into the room. The Harrington Medical Foundation Gala had been held every year for the past 19 years. It raised money, real money, 8 figures in a good year, for pediatric research, for equipment in underfunded hospitals, for the kind of work that kept children alive who would otherwise not survive their first decade. That was what it said on the website. That was what it said on the invitations. What the website did not say was that the gala had become, over the past decade, the exclusive social territory of the Harrington family itself. Franklin Harrington had started the foundation after his daughter's cancer diagnosis and subsequent recovery. 30 years later, Franklin was gone and his son, Prescott Harrington, ran the foundation, the way you run something that was never yours to begin with great ceremony and very little attention to what it was actually for. Prescott was 54 years old, silver-haired, and absolutely certain that every room he entered was improved by his presence. He had a wife named Claudine who wore only white or cream and who had not said a genuinely kind word to anyone outside her immediate family, in so long that the capacity for it had likely atrophied entirely. They had 2 sons, both of whom worked in positions at the foundation that had been created specifically for them and required almost nothing. The Harringtons had been the public face of pediatric medicine in this cities for 20 years. The hospital wing bore their name. The annual gala raised their profile, and the research, the actual research, the compounds and the trials and the patents that had changed treatment protocols across the country, had been funded, in large part, by a private investment firm. The firm was called Vance Capital Group. It had no website. It had no social media presence. Its name appeared nowhere on the Harrington Foundation's printed materials, because Theodora had specifically requested it remain off the record. She had her reasons. She had always had her reasons. What the Harringtons knew, and Prescott in particular knew, was that someone at Vance kept the lights on. What they had never bothered to find out was who that someone was. This was, in retrospect, a significant oversight. Theodora was 31 years old. She had a medical degree she'd completed at 26, a PhD in molecular pharmacology she'd finished 2 years later, and a mind that processed problems the way other people processed breathing. Continuously. Without effort, without needing to be reminded. She had grown up in Baltimore, the daughter of a school librarian and a retired firefighter, in a house where books were stacked on every surface, and money was always slightly short, but never spoken about as something shameful. She had worked. That was the honest version of the story. She had worked in the way that leaves marks, the kind of early mornings and late nights, and skipped meals and foregone weekends that most people can sustain for a semester before they crack. She had sustained it for a decade. She had built something real. Vance Capital Group had started as a research consultancy. It had grown. By the time Theodora was 29, she had enough capital under management to make investments that changed the trajectory of organizations. The Harrington Foundation had been one of them. A careful, quiet investment that had kept the foundation's pediatric trial program running during 3 consecutive years when their public fundraising had fallen short. She had never attended the gala before. She had never wanted to. She came this year because her attorney, a precise woman named Gretchen Adler, who had been managing Theodora's contracts for 4 years, had told her it was time. "They're expanding," Gretchen had said, spreading papers across her desk. "New wing, new equipment contracts. They're going to need more capital, and they're going to come looking for it. You should be in the room when that conversation happens." Theodora had thought about it for a week. Then she had RSVP'd. She had worn a dress the color of deep water, midnight blue, with a single strand of graduated pearls her mother had given her when she defended her dissertation. She had done her hair. She had taken a car to the Alderton Grand and walked through the doors and been looked at immediately, like a problem someone would have to handle. She had expected that, too. She had expected all of it. She just hadn't expected the Harringtons to make it so easy. The ballroom was the kind of room that cost money to be in. Not admission money. That was just the ticket. The kind of money that had been spent building and maintaining the room itself, the kind of money that breathes out of the walls in certain spaces and makes the air feel different. The chandelier overhead was original to the building. The flowers on every table were arranged by a firm that flew in specific varieties from specific farms. The bar was open, but the bartenders moved with a studied slowness that suggested you were meant to take your time. Theodora took a glass of sparkling water and found a place near the edge of the room where she could see without being immediately absorbed into conversation. She watched. The Harringtons moved through the room like it had been built for them. Prescott worked the left side, Claudine the right, and their sons. 2 men in their late 20s, named Fletcher and Reed, who had their father's coloring and their mother's effect, circulated through the center, shaking hands, leaning in, laughing. They were good at this. She would give them that. Whatever else they were, whatever carelessness and assumption ran through them, like a current, they were good at this particular performance. A woman near Theodora leaned toward her friend and murmured something. The friend glanced at Theodora and looked away. Theodora noted it the way you note the temperature, not pleasant but not surprising. She took a sip of her water. Gretchen materialized at her side. 15 minutes later, efficient as always. "You're here," Gretchen said. "I'm here," Theodora agreed. "Prescott's about to make his speech. After that, he's going to make rounds to the major donors. I've arranged for you to be introduced. His assistant knows your name." Theodora nodded. This was fine. This was the plan. Everything was the plan. What happened next was not the plan. What happened next was Claudine Harrington. It was a small thing. The way these things always start small. Theodora had moved slightly, repositioning to get a better view of the podium ahead of Prescott's speech. In doing so, she'd stepped slightly into the path of Claudine, who was moving in the opposite direction with a group of women in coordinated cream and gold. Theodora stepped back, said, "Excuse me." Simple as that. Claudine stopped, looked at Theodora the way you look at something that has appeared in a place it should not be. "Are you with the catering staff?" Claudine said. Her voice was polite in the way a blade is polished, smooth surface, sharp edge. "No," Theodora said. Claudine's eyes moved to the glass of sparkling water in Theodora's hand, to the pearls at her throat, back to her face. "Can I ask who invited you?" she said. Theodora reached into her small clutch and produced the invitation for the second time that evening. She held it out. She did not let go of it. Claudine looked at the name without touching the card. Something moved behind her eyes. Not recognition. The opposite of recognition. "There must be some confusion," Claudine said. The donor tables are all assigned. I'm not sure where you're meant to be sitting." "Table 6, Theodora said. "I have assigned seating." Claudine's mouth pressed into something that was not quite a smile. "I think there's been an administrative error," she said. She turned to one of the women beside her. "Can someone find Marcus? There seems to be a guest situation." "A guest situation." Theodora felt the words land. She let them land. She did not move. Marcus, a young man in a headset who had the slightly hunted look of someone whose job involved managing things no one else wanted to manage, appeared within 90 seconds. He looked at Theodora. He looked at Claudine. He understood immediately the shape of what he was being asked to do. "Ma'am," he said to Theodora, "can I help you find?" "I know where I'm going," Theodora said. Her voice was level. Her voice was always level. "Table 6. I've confirmed my seating." Marcus looked at his tablet, found her name. Something crossed his face, a flicker of something like relief, because now he had data. Now this wasn't just a judgment call. "Dr. Vance," he said. "Yes, of course. Table 6 is. I know where table 6 is," Theodora said. She was not unkind about it, just clear. She began to walk in that direction, and that was when Claudine's hand came out. It was not a gentle thing. It was not the touch of someone trying to get someone's attention. It was a grip, fingers closing around Theodora's upper arm, and then a motion, forward and to the side, that had weight and intention behind it. The pearls caught first. The strand at Theodora's throat pulled taut, and then the clasp gave way, and the pearls came apart in a long cascading arc, striking the marble floor in a sound that was small and bright, and carried, somehow, across the ambient noise of the room like a signal. Everyone heard it. That was the thing. Everyone heard it, and everyone turned, and for the span of 5 full seconds, an eternity in a crowded room, no one said anything. The pearls scattered. Some rolled under chairs. Some came to rest against shoes. 3 stopped at Claudine's feet. Theodora stood very still. She did not look at the pearls. She looked at Claudine, and Claudine looked back at her with the face of someone who has just done something they can't take back and has not yet decided whether to acknowledge it. "I want her removed," Claudine said. She said it quietly, to the room, to Marcus, to no one specific, and that was when Prescott Harrington appeared. He had heard the pearls. He had heard the silence. He came from the podium direction, moving with the assured speed of a man who has managed situations at events like this before, and he took one look at the scene. The pearls on the floor, Theodora standing still, Claudine with her chin lifted, and he made a decision. He made the wrong one. "What's the issue?" he said, and his voice was addressed to Marcus, not to Theodora, which was itself a statement. "This woman," Claudine began. "I was invited," Theodora said. Her voice had not changed in pitch or temperature. "I have a confirmed seat at table 6. Your wife grabbed my arm and broke my pearl necklace. Those are the facts." Prescott looked at her the way men like him look at people they've decided not to see. "I'm sure this can be sorted out," he said. "Why don't we step outside for a moment?" "I'm not going outside," Theodora said. A silence. Around them, the room was very quiet now. Someone had lowered the music. People were watching with the particular attention of people who are watching something they know they will be talking about later. "Ma'am," Prescott said, and there was something in the word. Something compressed and assuming and final. That was worse, in some ways, than anything Claudine had said. "My name is Dr. Theodora Vance," she said. "I am the managing director of Vance Capital Group. Your foundation has received a total of $4.3 million from my firm over the past 5 years. The current operating budget for your pediatric trial program, the one Dr. Ellsworth runs, the one that is up for expansion, the one you are here tonight to raise money for, is funded 40% by a commitment my firm made last February. My attorney finalized that paperwork. You have a meeting next Tuesday with your board to discuss the new wing." She stopped. Let the information settle. "I know," she continued, "because I am supposed to be at that meeting." Nothing moved in the room. Not the waitstaff. Not the other guests. Not Prescott Harrington, who was, for the first time perhaps in his adult life, experiencing the specific vertigo of realizing the ground is not where you thought it was. Claudine's hand had dropped to her side. Theodora looked at her once more. Then she looked down at the pearls on the floor. She did not bend to pick them up. "I'll need those returned," she said. "Those were my mother's." Then she turned and walked to table 6 and sat down. There was a camera in the room. 2, actually. Standard event photography for the Foundation's annual report. But the one that mattered was a third camera, a small device positioned inside the flower arrangement at the registration table, its lens angled to capture the entry corridor where guests arrived and were greeted. Theodora had not placed that camera, but she had known it was there. Her attorney Gretchen had flagged, 6 weeks earlier, that someone else had filed a complaint against the Alderton Grand's event staff. A similar situation at a corporate dinner, a similar set of assumptions, a similar outcome. That complainant had no documentation. The complaint had gone nowhere. Gretchen had made a call to a colleague, who had made a call to the hotel's head of security, a woman named Patricia Dunn, who had been with the Alderton Grand for 16 years and who had, it turned out, very clear feelings about what kept happening at these events and what kept not being done about it. Patricia Dunn had positioned that camera herself. She had done it on her own authority, within the hotel's legal rights to monitor its own property. She had told no one except Gretchen. What it captured that evening was everything. The interaction at the door, the exchange with Claudine, the grip, the pearls, the scatter and the silence. Prescott's face as Theodora spoke. All of it, in clear, well-lit footage, from an angle that left nothing ambiguous. Patricia Dunn had the footage secured before Theodora's car reached her home that night. Gretchen called at 8:45 the next morning. "The footage is with us," she said. "Patricia delivered it last night. It's clean. Everything's there." Theodora was at her kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a legal pad she'd been writing on for an hour. "And the board meeting?" she said. "Tuesday. Still scheduled. I've been in contact with 3 board members who did not attend the gala. They've seen the footage." Theodora wrote something on the legal pad, crossed it out, wrote it again. "What's the timeline on the capital commitment?" she said. "We have a 60-day window before the construction contracts need to be signed," Gretchen said. "If the commitment is withdrawn, the new wing doesn't happen. The trial program continues at current capacity, which means the expanded pediatric protocol they've been planning doesn't get off the ground for at least 2 years. Theodora set down her pen. "I'm not withdrawing the commitment," she said. A pause on Gretchen's end. "Theo, I'm not withdrawing it," she said again. "The research is real. The children are real. That doesn't change because Claudine Harrington doesn't know how to be a human being." She picked up her pen again. "What's going to change is everything else." The board meeting happened on Tuesday. It was supposed to be 20 minutes of presentation, 30 minutes of discussion, a vote on the construction contract and a group photograph. That was the agenda as it had been distributed. What actually happened was that at the moment Prescott stood to open the meeting, Gretchen Adler walked in. She was followed by 2 other attorneys, a representative from the hotel, and a woman named Sylvia Grant who served on the boards of 4 other medical foundations, and who had, until that morning, been considering whether to join this one. Prescott said, "This isn't." Gretchen said, "Sit down, please." He sat. Whatever else he was not stupid enough to push back on that particular tone in a room full of witnesses. The footage played on a laptop connected to the conference room screen. 6 minutes and 40 seconds of footage. No one spoke while it ran. When it ended, 3 board members, including the vice chair, a retired surgeon named Dr. Francis Obi, who had been with the foundation for 11 years, asked Prescott and Claudine to leave the room. They left. Sylvia Grant, who had watched the footage with her hands folded and her expression entirely composed, said, "I would like to make a motion." She made several motions. They were voted on. The votes were not close. What followed happened quickly, the way these things do once the mechanism is set in motion. The Harrington family's operational control of a foundation was transferred to an independent board. Prescott's title, president, which had been largely ceremonial for years and was now formally so, was dissolved. The foundation's name remained because it had been his father's foundation, and his father had been a different kind of person, and no one wanted to erase that. The new wing would be built. The pediatric trial expansion would proceed. Vance Capital Group's commitment was formalized under a new agreement that included, for the first time, named acknowledgement of the firm's contributions in the foundation's public materials. Theodora had asked for that acknowledgement specifically, not for vanity, because the next young researcher who came to this foundation with a funding request should know who had been in this room and what had been possible. Claudine Harrington released a statement through a publicist. The statement used the word regret 3 times and the phrase did not intend twice. It did not use the word sorry. Theodora read it once and did not read it again. Prescott's statement said less and meant less. It was the statement of a man who had understood, finally, that the ground had shifted and there was nothing to be done about it. The hotel footage had reached the internet by Wednesday. Theodora hadn't released it. Patricia Dunn hadn't released it. But someone at the board meeting had, and once it was out, it moved the way things move when they contain something people recognize. The comments were what you'd expect. A lot of anger. A lot of people who had experienced similar things in similar rooms saying so. A lot of people who had never experienced it watching and not quite believing it was real, because they had never stood in a doorway and been looked at that way. And so it seemed, to them, like something from another time. It wasn't from another time. It was last Saturday. It was the Alderton Grand Hotel, a city most of them lived in or near, a foundation many of them had donated to over the years. Dr. Francis Obi, in a brief interview with a local news outlet, said this: "The foundation exists to support research that saves children's lives. That work was happening because of Dr. Vance's commitment. The board's responsibility is to the work. We acted accordingly." He said nothing about Claudine. He didn't need to. 3 weeks after the gala, Theodora walked into the pediatric research wing of Harrington Children's Hospital, not the new wing. That was still months from completion. The existing wing, with its slightly dated equipment and its fluorescent lighting, and the mural on the wall, near the elevator that someone had painted years ago, bright colors and animal shapes for the children who came through. She had not come for a meeting. She had come because Dr. Rita Ellsworth, the head of the trial program, a woman in her late 40s who had been running this research for 12 years with the focused energy of someone who had decided, a long time ago, that the rest of it didn't matter, had called and asked if she'd like to see where the money went. Rita walked her through the labs, explained the protocols in language that assumed Theodora could follow, which she could, and asked her questions about the pharmacological side of things that turned into a real conversation, not a donor tour, not a performance. In one of the rooms, there was a child, a small girl, maybe 7, sitting on an exam table with a tablet in her lap, headphones on, watching something that made her laugh with a laugh that took up her whole face. A parent sat in the chair beside her, reading. The parent looked tired. The child looked like she was having the best moment of a pretty ordinary day. Theodora stood in the doorway, for a moment. Rita stood beside her. Neither of them said anything. Then they kept walking, in the foundation's new materials, the ones that would go out with the next annual report. The ones that would accompany the announcement of the wing's construction. There was a section that had not been there in previous years. It listed the major contributors to the trial program's expansion. It included the names of researchers. It included a brief history of the funding. It included Vance Capital Group. And, in the line that described the firm, it included the name of its managing director. Theodora saw the proof copy on a Friday afternoon, forwarded from the foundation's communications director, with a note asking if the description was accurate and if she wanted any changes. She read it twice, found it accurate, made no changes. She put the proof copy in a folder and set the folder on her desk. Beside it, in a small glass dish, were 11 pearls, the ones that had been returned to her, individually, by hotel staff who had collected them from the ballroom floor that night. Not all of them. Some were still missing, but most of them were there. She hadn't restrung them yet. She hadn't decided whether she would. But she kept them on her desk, where she could see them. Not as a reminder of the night they broke. As a reminder of what had happened after. Which was not nothing. Which was in fact quite a lot. Which was the kind of thing her mother, the school librarian, who had given her those pearls and told her to hold her shoulders back and keep her eyes open, would have found entirely satisfying. The pearls caught the light. The room was quiet. Somewhere across the city, at whatever function they had found their way to next. The Harringtons were somewhere else. The work continued.